I mean, I've been to Peterborough once. It's a bit of but it might get a bit nicer.
I think you've been looking at the house prices in Peterborough lately.
Is that a Peterborough accent?
No.
Oh my God, we're gonna get letters, or should I say emails? Anyway,
I don't know, probably letters from Peterborough at the moment.
So there's
messenger pigeons.
Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. Just as a reminder, if you're watching us on Facebook or on the site, you can also listen to us on SoundCloud or iTunes and vice versa. If you listen to us, you can watch us on the site or on Facebook. This week I'm joined by Jamie as ever, and then we've got Ray back from yet another holiday.
Ray back, that's my new name.
Pair of Raybacks. And we will be talking about digital police. We'll then be talking about public open infrastructure, and we'll be finishing off with a bit of automation. So I'll start with digital police. I apologise to Ray and Jamie and our listeners. I'm going to talk about Facebook again, but it just happens to be the thing that has been going on quite a lot. This week we had Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, go appear before a bunch of senators, and they were all going, "What's all this business about?" Then there were varying degrees. Some of them were quite clued up. Ted Cruz was asking some quite sort of canny questions about this and that, and other people were just saying, "So what is it you do then at the end of the day?
Why are you sitting on a very high cushion?"
Yeah, and why do you look like Data out of Star Trek?
Yeah,
and that sort of
thing.
thing.
You do own a suit.
Where'd you get your hair done? Anyway, and various things.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to recap that. I've written a couple of pieces about it. It was mainly quite sort of defensive, cautious answers from Zuckerberg, but I think sort of still fair play to the bloke for turning up and being grilled by all these politicians, because he's obviously not keen on that sort of thing. So he did front up, but there were quite a lot of "I'll have to get back to you on that," including some things that you would have expected him to know. But there's a sort of slight tangent from that, which is, I think we all agree from chatting about it, that the world is playing catch up on how to regulate and police the digital economy. So Facebook came up with this bright idea however long ago, it wasn't that much more than a decade ago, of basically exchanging, you give me your personal information and I'll give you this sort of networking service in return.
13 years ago, it's about to turn 14.
Right, there we go. So it's only that old, and it's only been sort of ramping for about a decade.
Yeah.
And everyone, well, fair enough. There was no precedent for it. It's free, no harm done, all that sort of thing. And only now are regulators and lawmakers and politicians catching up and going, hold on a minute, this is a bit dodgy. He's getting hold of all this data. Jamie, we've spoken about data as a currency and all that sort of thing. And my feeling is that the lawmakers and the regulators and the police are really sort of struggling to catch up. Do you agree with that, Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of posturing going on at the moment, and I've got a little bit of sympathy for Facebook in that they're being told off for something they did 3 years ago, and they're being held to today's standards for something they did 3 years ago.
Is that the Cambridge Analytica thing?
Well, just everything in general in terms of, and this is where you can't really blame the big innovative internet companies, because they're venturing into unknown lands.
Yeah, they're just trying stuff out.
They're trying stuff out for the first time, and of course there is no right and wrong when nothing has been done before. They're crossing an invisible line in the sand, and they're being told off because they didn't know where the line was, even though it hadn't been determined.
And being told off retrospectively, in effect. Yeah.
So, but I mean, the worst thing possible that could come out of this is that people, don't push as far as they do. Like they did, like Facebook.
Right.
Was exploring the unknown,
yeah,
and it pushed too far, and we're holding it to account now. But then all of a sudden, if you tell companies to be more careful, progress is going to slow to an absolute snail's pace.
Well, and be more careful in what way? I mean, we can't predict what the sort of digital economy is going to come up with.
I mean, you don't know that you've done something wrong until you've done something wrong, if it's never been done before.
Yeah, if there's no precedent. Exactly.
It's really difficult. So I have got a bit of
I
sympathy.
think some people had some pretty good ideas that they
Yes, yeah. But they covered it up and they didn't say anything, but then they knew about it afterwards, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So they did the action and then so this is where I think Facebook should be held accountable, is that it didn't own up and say that we screwed that up. A lesson for everyone. This is how we should be doing things in the future.
Right.
They covered it up for 3 years.
And this should set alarm bells ringing about, okay, so the whole social media thing was something new. It's not regulated. It went outside of regulatory borders.
Yeah.
And instead of going, right, how can we now regulate and get control of this, etc., I think they need to be looking at the broader thing and go, what else is happening right now that might come back to really bite everybody in the bum?
They're constantly playing catch up, aren't they?
Constantly. So maybe they should go, right, that is something to work on, and we'll let the industry, the people who really understand it, come up with some ideas, etc. In the meantime, the global financial sector is a pretty mature industry. What's going on with blockchain and Bitcoin? Have we got a handle on that? Is everybody okay with that? Are people going to get exploited? Yada yada yada. I mean, nobody knows, but I think there seems to be some looking at how could technology actually make poorer countries even poorer, unless some action is taken. Because I think that's it'll make the rich richer and the poor poorer.
I mean, this is one of the things I do really like that's been done this week, and this is a bit of it's not really directly relevant to what we're talking about, but it is to do with sort of like digital rules and digital policing.
We encourage tangents on the podcast.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's going back to something I mentioned, about an hour ago for us, which is
seems like years ago.
the new rules that have been brought out by the European Commission called the New Deal for Consumers. Now, this is where they actually recognise digital currency as a real thing in regulation and legislation. Okay. So they're actually, up until
the value of information,
the value of it, the value exchange between Facebook and us, to why we get free services for Facebook and what Facebook gets.
We're paying for it with our private lives.
Yeah. So they've actually officially recognising this as part of. So basically, when they're talking about if you buy digital services online, you have a 14-day grace period where you can say, right, cut it, let's get a refund, I'm not happy. Mm-hmm. That's been written into legislation, and part of these new rules are saying with the exchange of free services for data, that can also be cut within 14 days, and then everything that they have on you has to be completely wiped off.
And that's a big one, isn't it? That sort of residual footprint where they hold on to stuff even when it's wiped off the site.
So and I think that's an important step forward in that they're recognising how the digital the big data machine which fuels the digital economy is actually, they're recognising it in regulation, and they're making it a real thing now. So it starts to demystify the whole internet economy and starts to actually, and people become and can be held more accountable. So I think
and people are having a go at it from all sorts of directions. There's one thing I want to mention from these sort of Facebook things that I hadn't heard of, but was brought up. But another thing that occurs to me in response to what you were just saying, Jamie, we've had Trump in between coming out with his sort of crazy ass tweets. It's been having a big go at Amazon, and again, what he's basically doing is having a go at a novel sort of digital economy thing. In this case, his particular beef is that Amazon's sort of exploiting the US Postal Service.
I know.
And tax
He's such
system.
an idiot, isn't he?
That
and all
cost
that
Jeff
sort of thing.
Bezos $20 billion. That one tweet.
Right. Well, I mean, but
Or him.
I don't know enough about it. I mean, if Amazon is paying considerably less per weight of stuff than anyone else, then maybe that is worth looking at.
But on the other side of things, this economy of scale. Like how many people are actually sending parcels through the post?
Yeah.
And the postal service has been reinvigorated by the presence of
but
Amazon.
his tweet, and I'm not going to take a Trump tweet of all tweets literally, but I'm just saying what he said was they're actually losing money per Amazon package they post.
Okay, well, I think they need to look at their efficiencies because the stats that I read say that area of the US Postal Service is the only one that's growing in terms of revenues year on year, and I think it was something like 2.1. They made 2.1 billion more this year compared to last year.
It could well all be bollocks, but I flag it up more as an illustration of yet another area in which we're sort of testing the parameters and the boundaries and the legality. And another one that came up, there's a senator called Ted Cruz, who I think was stood against Trump in the primaries in the US. Not that that's any relevance to this, but still. And he flagged up this...
Yeah, he was the last standing candidate, wasn't he?
I think so, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
No, or was it Rubio? Anyway, whatever.
One of them.
He flagged up this thing, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which I think is a hilarious name for a law. Communications decency. You must not be indecent when you communicate, good sir. And it says here that I think the quote is, no provider or user of an interactive computer service, which is again wonderfully sort of archaic language, shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider, which basically means that if you're a neutral message board, just like we were speaking about in the pod last week, if you're a neutral sort of notice board, then you're not accountable for any of the stuff that goes on there. And the reason he flagged it up is he was trying to talk Zuckerberg into a corner, because some people are worried that Zuckerberg adopts a political position. Silicon Valley is generally considered a bit sort of lefty and all that sort of thing. He's going, are you neutral or not? And Zuckerberg kind of sort of dodged the whole thing.
Can't win, can he, there?
It is a tough one.
You got to censor hate speech and far left and far right speakers, but you've got to remain completely neutral. Otherwise, we're going to accuse you of having a political leaning.
I'm with you. I have some sympathy, which is why I don't think they should make them the censors.
No. I like we were talking about last week. I think they need to be the idea of it has to be a curator. I mean, they have to be completely hands off. Advertising and sort of censorship, even the light touch stuff where you're only getting rid of the far left and far right. I don't think they cross over with a sort of a neutral platform that encourages free speech. I think
someone's got to make the call.
Someone's got to make the call, but I think it's not a publisher. They've just got to be labelled a curator or something like that. You can't. Yeah. There has to be a new. And then someone's got to tell them
what. Someone's got to tell them what they censor. If they leave it to their discretion, then there's always going to be these claims that they're biased.
It's a bloody nightmare. Just let them do what they do.
What do you think, Ray? Do you think we should more in the direction of just letting everyone say all kinds of crazy stuff, or should we go more in the direction of just having quite strict rules on what can and can't be said in the public domain? Where are you on that equilibrium?
On the middle ground, on the fence, I'm afraid. I mean, there have to be, the general laws of the land again, decency and racist language, etc., etc. But if you start to, I mean, where is the jurisdiction that anybody, if you had laws, really strict laws come out in the United States, for example, then that's only relevant to the United States, isn't it?
No, totally.
Or what about guns? If I posed with a gun in central London, I would be deemed a terror threat. If I pose with a gun in central Dallas, I'm a
good old boy.
I'm a Constitution following American.
Yeah. No, I think you're both right. The international aspect of it. You're both right. Well done, both of you. We've got these things that are by definition global properties, global services, and that's the other area in which lawmakers everywhere are struggling to catch up. Is how do you
regionalise that?
Yeah, and should we try and create some sort of world digital court or world digital parliament or something like that? Which obviously is as ludicrous as it sounds, but what are the solutions, or have they got to get their head around 100 different laws?
I think realistically that is if you're going to encourage a global platform, and that sort of thing there has to be some sort of international court or that deals with these issues. You can't have them dealt with in the States, because what's offensive in the States might not be offensive in Singapore. What's offensive in Singapore might not be offensive in France.
Totally.
There has to be some sort of
You've
independence.
even got language. The same word can mean different things.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
different countries. I mean, another like more sort of Orwellian thing
Like
would
the
be
the
to have-
Aussies love dropping the C-bomb, but
right.
we find
Not
it
so
offensive.
much.
Apparently, I don't. I love saying, but
It's
You
even more
just love
offensive
it.
in America.
yeah. The Americans really hate it,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they got one in charge of their country.
There
So
we go. He's off. He's off. A more sort of Orwellian solution would be for the state to establish a filter, so everyone can post what they want on whatever platform, but then before it reaches the outside world, it goes through some kind of censorship filter. But I don't think I'd want that. But that would be one solution to this sort of national, different national rules and regulations. So I think it's a tough one. I think that they're all playing catch up. My worry, in the sort of equilibrium that I proposed to you, Ray, I'm definitely sort of erring more towards free speech. Anything, there's actual laws like incitement to violence and recruitment of terrorism, and that should be it. If people want to say completely douchey things, no one stops Trump tweeting, do they?
I think they got to decide what they want it to be, and I think to be perfectly honest, it's just purely because there's lots of money going through Facebook. I mean, do you see anyone arguing about?
Anybody cares.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see anyone arguing about what people say on Reddit? And there's some really offensive stuff that goes on Reddit.
Some hardcore stuff.
But no one's bringing that
4chan
up.
or something like that.
Yeah, those sort.
Yeah, it's just that Facebook is more accessible.
Yes.
And it has a much greater influence. So it's to do with money and influence. Influence and reach.
I think I think they just need to decide what it is. It can't be freedom of speech, and you can't have Facebook encouraging freedom of speech and also searching for terrorist cells. Because what is deemed terrorist might be sarcastic, and therefore you're hindering free speech. There's no middle ground, I don't think.
No, and they're all struggling. It's not just
difficult.
Facebook. We've got YouTube demonetizing people. We've got Twitter banning people, and all that sort of thing. One other thing, before we move on from this topic, Jamie, you wrote a piece about some sort of interesting stuff that's happening in the States over things like net neutrality and that sort of thing. They've got a different system to over here, whereby individual states can make their own laws to some extent.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of states that don't agree with what the FCC came up with about net neutrality. So why don't you just tell us a little bit more about that?
So there's like 24, 25 states that don't like them sort of rolling back the net neutrality laws, and this is I need to do some real some sort of in-depth research to how critical the Communications Act is in the US. So we've got the Electronic Communications Act in the UK, which basically acts as the foundation stone of all communications, and I think it was written in the early 90s, so it's completely outdated.
Exactly.
But it forms the foundation of all our rules and regulations.
Yeah.
Now, they have a similar one in the US called the Communications Act, which essentially defines the regulatory tone for the communications industry across the USA. In this act, there is a clause which says no state, so states can write their own laws on the condition it doesn't supersede or contradict something that has been set at federal level.
Right.
So basically, with all these, with like Delaware and Florida and Washington passing laws to local laws at the state to sort of bring net neutrality rules back, they're directly contradicting and undermining the foundation stone of all national
So is there going to be like a
communications.
clash between state and federal then? Is it?
I
Or
think
is it already there?
I think it undermines it, and it completely it makes it redundant to a degree. Because if you're violating one clause, what does that say about the rest of it? Can you contradict or ignore the rest of the clauses as well? So does this mean one of the foundation stones in the communications industry in the States is basically faulty, and is that going to bring everything else down? I mean, how many of the laws rely on the precedent that is set in the Communications Act, and how many of them are going to wobble or waver because the local rules are completely ignoring federal laws? I think it's a complete it's a complete mess there at the moment, an absolute mess.
And I think we touched on one thing when you said that the Communications Act or whatever is from the 90s.
In the UK, I don't know when the US one was written.
But anyway, my central point is that the digital economy moves so quickly and lawmaking moves so slowly that they're just operating on a completely different cadence. So even if we do get a law through, by the time it's through, it's probably already obsolete.
So this is where one of the big problems with intelligence agencies and police seizing information off people lies, in that 20 years ago, a bit of information that police wanted would have been kept in your drawer in your living room. So there was a huge amount of process that the police would have to go to get a warrant to do quite an intrusive act to raid your house and get that information. But now it's on the cloud. So technically we're losing some of our rights to privacy.
And how much jurisdiction do they have over the cloud? I mean, those have been things with Google and Apple and all that.
It's again complete mess. Yeah. That's why Microsoft is in the middle of a massive battle about data that's stored on their Irish server that the DOJ and the US wants to get hold of, and they've got no jurisdiction over. It's just a complete mess because no one's regulated.
Smart money's been becoming a lawyer in this sort of area. It looks like there's going to be a nice lot of work to do. There's so much uncertainty. We've got things like GDPR and stuff coming up as well. Okay, cool. We next topic, Jamie. You wrote a piece. Back to you again. This is an interesting topic about sort of certain jurisdictions, certain regions, certain municipalities deciding to sort of take the lead in producing a degree of sort of infrastructure. And not waiting for some sort of private supplier to come out with it. So this is something that's happening in San Francisco. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, San Francisco basically put together a report that says we can build our own OpenReach style infrastructure and then lease
wholesale
it out.
Network.
And then lease it out like in an OTT model to communication providers throughout the city. The idea is it's 100% fibre. It'll cost $1.9 billion.
Is it public money?
This will be public money, but they'll finance it through various different means, and then make money by sort of like leasing the lines back to the broadband providers.
Okay.
But it's the idea of they'll have to get good at customer service. They'll have to get good at value-added services
just
because
being a business in general.
Well, it depends what the model is. If they're just building the infrastructure and just saying, right, you can come and use it. Here's some dark fibre. You folks light it.
So they haven't decided on that yet. So the question is, it costs $1.9 billion to have lit fibre, and then $1.5 billion to have dark fibre. So they're just weighing up the different models now. How would they monetize it? But the idea is, you can't be held accountable because or the person X over there isn't getting screwed because it's not commercially attractive to trench fibre out into their streets. They're going to be serving everyone in the city and then leasing it back.
And that's the value. I don't think they need to be thinking about how can they get their money back.
No. It's more about, I think there is concern because obviously it's public money, and for us talking about 1.9 billion, you think, oh well, okay, BT probably could foot that bill, no problem. Maybe not. But Verizon could probably foot that bill, no problem. But then again, could the city of San Francisco? Don't know.
Well, it's a good time to borrow money, and the thing is, if you as a city, if you have a complete cover of fibre infrastructure, you're basically setting yourself up to be a smart city, a digital city that attracts businesses, and it'll become a place where more people want to come and do business, more tax will be paid, more money will be generated, etc., etc. So it's a great investment.
I think it's a great investment.
It's a long-term investment.
Yeah, they've got.
If you don't do it, people will go somewhere else.
Indeed, you end up being like Detroit or something.
I mean, they've got a good startup scene now already, haven't they? So this is just going to accelerate it. So I mean, it's what is it? I've never actually been, but it's a healthy, thriving city from what
Indeed.
a lot of homeless people I've heard, but pretty healthy city. Having a full fibre network is just going to accelerate that.
Yeah, no, it all makes sense if you can find the public wedge, and I mean, you've seen what it's like in Australia with NBN. When there's public money going into infrastructure, it can become a very politicised and sort of fraught thing.
But the Californians are quite forward-looking people in full stop, I think, really, aren't they? So I think it's...
Well, and the interesting thing about it as well is the precedent will set if they do it and it works, then maybe that will encourage
and there's
others.
plenty of examples, other places around the US, towns that used to have manufacturing industries that went away, and then fibre was put in the ground and it's attracted digital companies. So it has been shown. I'm not sure if there are any exact studies that show what is the impact on local GDP of having 100% fibre coverage, but the general trend and impression is without it you're not attracting anybody, and you're not retaining the youth, the millennials, etc. But with it,
no one's doubting that you're going to need to do it sooner or later.
Yeah.
I mean, I think another good example. It's not directly relevant because it isn't sort of like a sort of a fibre network on the same scale as sort of like San Francisco are thinking of building. Is Bristol, like the OWNS network that they have in partnership with what is it? Bristol is Open, or whatever it is. I mean, you look at the way that the digital businesses and startups are thriving in Bristol. I go there occasionally. It's not a million miles away from where I grew up, and it's a really good, busy, sort of happy city at the moment.
Yeah, this is why the UK needed city fibre.
Yeah,
it's been the catalyst, I think, that could help the UK eventually, pull itself up out of, no matter how many, government ministers say, but the UK is in the top 7, broadband countries in the world.
Know.
Poppycock. It doesn't matter. It's about having a fibre infrastructure for the future, and that's what every country needs.
I think Milton Keynes will be a very interesting one to keep an eye on. So will Peterborough. Like with the way that Vodafone and Vodafone and City Fibre announced their third gigacity was Peterborough. I mean, they've got a huge number of smart city projects running there already. I mean, it's even before the sort of the fibre partnership was announced between those two telcos. Like Peterborough has been internationally recognised,
right?
And it could be a genuine, real step forward for that city. And what is it? I know it's a bit. I mean, I've been to Peterborough once. It's a bit ill, but it might get a bit nicer.
It might get nicer. Well, there we are. The only way is up, eh? Peterborough?
Yeah, exactly.
I also think like things like sort of remote working.
Yes.
So I can't remember. I was chatting to people about how impossible it is for anyone who's younger to sort of buy a house in London, and for the most people who live in London, they're barely breaking even because the cost of rent's so high and all that sort of thing. And of course, you don't need to live in London if you can work remotely. If you can live in Peterborough, warts and all, and have your digital economy job, and be dialed into the cloud and the VPN and all that stuff because you've got a good infrastructure, then you can go and buy your house where you can get a mansion in Peterborough for the price of a shoebox in London, and everyone's laughing. So
I don't think you've been looking at the house prices in Peterborough lately.
Is that a Peterborough accent?
No.
Oh my God, we're gonna get letters, or should I say emails? Anyway,
I don't know, probably letters from Peterborough at the moment.
So there's
messenger pigeons.
That'll be a Peterborough pigeon. And there's another place which I cannot comment on whether or not it's a shithole, called Helsingborg in Sweden. And I wrote a piece about them setting up. There's this sort of Swedish initiative to get IoT networks, so low power networks, going up, and it's done in partnership with this company called Actility that focuses on that sort of thing, and specifically LoRa, which is an alternative to things like NB-IoT. And anyway, they're setting this up, and it's a build it and they will come.
Yeah,
it's sort of publicly owned, wholesale, open. Here it is, use it or don't.
That's very much the Swedish model, though. They've done that on fibre as well. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, they're good at collaboration and general.
They did it recovering from the Great Depression as well.
Right.
And the big thing in
Sweden.
Swindon.
is that the
Not to be
focus
confused
there was on, if you wanted fibre to your home, you have to pay for it, have to pay for the installation, thousands of euros.
Right.
But people were prepared to pay it because basically the line is if you don't have this fibre connection, your house is worth such and such. If you have the fibre connection, it's worth way much more than the cost.
No-brainer.
So even if it's 2,000 euros to get that fibre into your home, the value of your home goes up by 10,000 euros. So it's a great investment.
Well, they say that's what a lot of people look for, isn't it? It adds value to a house. It's a good
Absolutely.
bathroom, a good garden, and soon it'll be a good fibre connection.
Indeed.
And that's, I remember about a year ago there was some massive electricity outage in a very large area in the east of London, and on the late evening news, the news crew was down there, and there was and we've been talking to people about, whether they're worried about, all the food in their freezers will go off, and all people were complaining about is, I can't get Wi-Fi now.
Yeah.
In all
Never
fairness,
mind the food.
I'm going to have to talk to my family.
Never mind the fact that there's no heating or anything.
I live in East London. I think I'm very stereotypical for most of the people around there. But I barely got any food in my fridge as it is, to be honest with you. I buy my food as I need it from Tesco's.
Oh, okay.
Fair enough. Driving some kids.
Wi-Fi though,
Don't change
put
the
me,
dynamic.
Christ,
Yeah, then it's
not a
just game
chance.
over, isn't it?
If I can't get access to my Trump tweets, how will I get through the day?
You could actually. We need an update. If you can't get access to your cryptocurrency trading, how's all that going?
It's all right. I'm sort of like level. I haven't gone up, I haven't gone down.
I saw some tweet today that Bitcoin just had a massive spike.
Is it spiked today? It was down.
Yeah, or
massively.
maybe it's just fluctuating all over the shop. But yeah, you're breaking even, are you? Okay,
I'm breaking even at the moment.
That's good news.
On my altcoin, not Bitcoin.
Well,
actually.
yes, I know. I keep conflating them. Behind the times. Okay, so moving on, Ray, you got one or two sort of general trends. One of which is automation that you've been mulling over.
And and that's a very big sort of that's a very broad topic, but it's the focus on the automation of processes and enabling essentially what was done manually before to be done by software, so on and so forth, is really starting to kick into a lot of different areas of the industry. Light Reading had an event last week in Dallas focused on that topic, and the feedback from my colleagues there was that not only was there a higher than normal percentage of people from network operators in the audience, the debate and the questions coming from the audience was way stronger than you would normally get at a conference, because everybody wants to know, how are other people doing it? Are there tools to enable it? Where do you start? What can be automated, etc., etc.? Because everybody needs to get their costs down, for one, and the other element of automation, of course, which is really important to 5G, is that once you've got the billions of IoT devices connected and you have 5G like networks running, the current manually intensive processes of running networks is not going to cut it.
Yeah.
So you need that automation, but it's also spilling over some of the really hot areas, and we saw this in the submissions for this year's Leading Lights Awards, for which we've just published the shortlists.
Double plug, good skills.
Absolutely. The number of entries we got for in the SD-WAN category was beyond expectations.
Right.
There was a lot of entries referencing intent-based networking, which again is linked to being able to automate processes. You basically instruct the network what you want to do. I want a service out to, these three locations using this service, and then the network does it based on your command.
Yeah.
That involves
so it's like mission command. You just make it happen.
This is now becoming really serious stuff that's starting to be. A lot of it's starting in the data center, but as with many of these things, and it was the same with SDN and virtualization, start in the data center and we'll move out to the wider area network. And and this whole area of the cloud and automation It's going to be pretty much, I would say, about 90% of the conversation in Austin.
Go on, do it.
I am.
Do
I'm
it.
going to
Go for the
triple
hat
plug. At the BCE event in Austin, Dallas next month, where apparently I am event chair.
Okay, good skills. You're not going to blow it out like the last one.
Huh?
Automation? You're on holiday, weren't you?
Oh, for the automation event last week. Yes, I was holidaying. I was No, I shall be working.
Yeah.
Working hard that
Any
week.
bluefin tuna on your holiday?
Indeed, there was. I was back in Valencia.
Excellent.
I took in the bluefin. Yeah.
Excellent.
No, it was excellent as well. But this entire area of how to automate manual processes is just blowing up everywhere.
And so you're talking about things like intent-based stuff. Presumably there's a big AI element to that.
Well, you would think so, but actually it depends who you talk to. Because the thing about intent-based networking, where you say, "I want this to happen," that's very descriptive. And if you say, "I want that to happen," you expect that to happen. You don't expect any tools to start, making changes that you haven't asked it to make. So for some people, introducing something like a machine learning algorithm that could recognize some patterns and start to change things over time based on that patterns, you might not want that because you didn't ask for it.
Yeah,
that was not your intent.
But if you're asking for an outcome and it works out the best way to produce that outcome,
I think there's. I mean, that's
I think there's various schools of thought around that, but it's not as it seems like an obvious thing, but it's not obvious. It's not as obvious as it sounds.
I mean, I think that's just taking it one step further, isn't it? You have the rules based on the edge, and then you send all the data back to the core of the network, and then the process is refined, and then the rules are sent back out to the edge, and then it operates by those rules, and then just sort of that back and forth, constantly learning and adapting as you go. But it is very much a case of you have the rule, and let's follow the rule until something better has come up. So I think that's what you're talking about, isn't it? In sort of in intent-based networking, or have I completely got it wrong there?
You may have done.
Okay.
Well, as you are,
I don't know. I sort of followed that.
I see.
But I think what I'm saying, I think there, depending on who you talk to, having some kind of active machine learning algorithms in the process is a good thing for some people and not a good thing for others. So there's different schools of thought. But I think for me, when I thought about it, I thought, it's definitely going to be a part, because you want things to improve and get better, but it's not absolutely the case.
Right.
Well, sometimes it sort of like violates not necessarily violates, but it doesn't adhere to the contracts. If you change something,
that's right.
and it might be better, but they're not the terms that you agreed. So
also, I think there's an awful lot to be learned. Nobody really knows the outcome of enabling, and I'm not going into the whole science fiction realm here, but nobody knows how specific you need to be in the policies and rules and requests set. And I think that this has already been discovered in lots of different places where you go, we'll set this up, and then the machine will learn, and then you turn around and the machine has completely changed it because you weren't strict enough on the parameters given to that machine learning algorithm. There's so much to learn on this. So it's all baby steps. It's really baby steps.
It's such an incredible balance on acts, though, isn't it? So you've got to have these strict policies to make sure that the machine actually does the things that you want it to do and doesn't wander off and do something else. But you've got to make them loose enough so it can be creative and find better solutions.
And this is why people are going to.
It's tough.
This is why people are turning up to these conferences and not sitting there looking at their phone doing their email. They're listening to the guy from
Pierre.
they're listening to the guy
Being a bit quiet,
from
isn't
Telstra, and they're listening to the guy from Sprint
Yeah.
and from Verizon to
So
find
desperate
what are
to
they
learn.
doing. Should I be doing that? What were the first steps?
Does it so happen that those are the people speaking at BCSE? BC?
No, this was the event last
Oh,
week,
right, okay.
So, I mean,
He's wondering if you're still plugging.
broader range of people speaking at BC.
I
We're
get.
talking about many other things at BC. But
But it's so complicated.
Yes, and of course, the more complex and the more hard it is, the more people need to know and find out. So,
I think there's. We'll start wrapping it up. There's a sort of full circle on this, because one of the things I took away when I was reading the transcript of Zuckerberg's grilling by these senators was he said we're going to have 20,000 sort of moderators, just basically keeping an eye on everything that goes on the platform and taking dodgy stuff down. But he said, ideally we want it to be a sort of AI algorithm type of thing, where you've just got something in the matrix that automatically detects moody posts. And he said we're at least sort of 5 to 10 years away from that being effective.
That'll never bloody work.
Well, exactly. So that's what I thought I'd mention, because it made me think of
Never
it when
say
we're talking
never.
about this other stuff. I mean, they might get there eventually, but there's this balance, and this is similar to what you're talking about, the trends within sort of telecoms. There's this balance between human intervention and machine intervention. And human intervention, obviously, there's a degree, there's a human brain, and there's the flexibility, and there's the ability to sort of improvise and that sort of thing.
Yes.
And perhaps not take instructions too literally or too far that you might have with a machine. But then humans are expensive, because we all got salaries, we all got to rent a house in London and all that sort of thing.
The problem is that exactly what Ray said. It's so immensely complicated to write the policies. I mean, what is stopping? You've got these AI bots that are controlling and moderating all the conversations. What's stopping some nefarious individual sort of messing around with the machine algorithm? What was it? 3 years ago, Microsoft and Tay. Where it started off as a very nice
those are the questions people
nice
were asking.
teenager, and it turned into like some
rabid.
absolute sex fiend who has sort of like wet dreams over Hitler. It didn't take long. But what, 24 hours to turn that one around?
Yeah. No, I mean there's a lot to learn. It can't end well, and I'm learning how to grow my own vegetables.
Yeah, totally. Well, exactly. You start thinking of sort of classic sort of paradigms like HAL out of 2001, or of course good old Terminator that I bring up every now and then.
I reckon I'd be all right in post-apocalyptic world.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You don't like guns.
He's got his
I don't like
altcoin.
guns, no, but I can lift heavy things, so people
he can
will look
dig
after
deep
me.
into his altcoin.
Do a bit of altcoin mining. So yes, no, I suppose just to sort of summarise, getting that balance right between automation and still getting people to do stuff. We're obviously going more in the automation area. Like you go to McDonald's now, and there's hardly any people there at all, and you do it all on the screen.
It's so much quicker though.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's
So
bad. I'm not
much
saying
quicker.
bad. I'm just observing an anecdotal like high street trend. You go to Sainsbury's and you're mainly not paying a sort of cashier and that sort of thing. But there might come a point where we try and
frees
automate
the
too
people
far.
up to fill the shelves of all the things that people were able to buy quicker.
Well, yeah. So we've
And this, I think, and just to
sure.
to not to extend it too long, but the big fear here is, you automate a lot of these processes, and it's an opportunity to reduce workforces potentially quite significantly.
Oh yeah, 100%.
That's the potential, but what I'm hearing directly from some people I've spoken to who actually manage these teams who are running these big networks is that they might have, for example, if you're a big tier 1 operator in the United States, you might have 800 people working on your network operations, but pretty much all they're doing is firefighting. Now, if you can free up half of those people to not be firefighting, they can actually be working on the stuff that they were hired to work on in the first place. Developing new capabilities, helping to come up with the better policies for the automation tools, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think undoubtedly there will be job cuts, but if you took 80% of an operations team out with an automated tool, I don't think that necessarily means that 80% of that team will end up on the dole queue.
Right.
No, just 50.
Well, it could be 80. I mean, it could be 80. It could be 10.
Yeah.
And it'll vary from operator to operator.
Cool.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Right. I'll sign off as I have before. I hope they never automate journalism, or we're all in shtuck. Hope they never automate podcasts and three blokes talking in the studio. So on that note, thanks again for listening to us talk said, and make sure you join us for the next one.